This will be
Everyone
job
stand and join me in the
explaining
Pledge of
everything.
Allegiance. We can get going.
2 times a day.
I pledge
Flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands.
Somebody is trying to
location.
screw us up, Chuck.
The wrong location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, it's school district, those guys.
I was looking at the clock.
And we do have a clock today, so. Okay. First thing on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Is there any changes or any additions?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Second.
Okay, got a motion by Dave Brusick, seconded by Pat Scripture. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, the agenda is approved, and we will go to number one. Chris, are you taking number one?
I believe I am.
Okay.
Gotta get used to setup here again. This is only my second time here, so. Okay, well, thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Before you, for consideration here tonight is approving ordering the feasibility study for the 2015 street and utility project. So we're basically at it again. If you look at the drawing that I have up here on the screen, this is the drawing from the updated capital improvements plan that was updated in 2013 after we had shuffled some of the streets in the downtown city center area. This area to the west, you'll see labeled as 2015, 6th Avenue, 3rd Street, 2nd Street, and a block of 1st Street. And then the 2016 area just to the west of that. I know when we developed this capital improvements plan, and literally over the last couple of years, been really kind of scratching our head about really how to look at this neighborhood and how to do the project. Glenn and I have had conversations over the last couple of years, and based on what we see today, we're recommending that we actually consider doing the reports for 2015 to also include the 2016 area. The 2015 area, again, as I mentioned, 5th Avenue, 3rd Street, 2nd Street, and 1st Street, just to the west of Highway 21. We've also got a stretch of, we'll call it a private drive, it's on the south side of the public safety building property that's being used by the public. It's not an effective street. Effectively, it's not platted, but we'd like to look at what's some type of solution that can be done with that area. So that's the 2015 area that we had identified in the capital improvements plan. Again, we are recommending to include the 2016 project in the study. This doesn't necessarily mean that we will do the project all in 1 year, but we can effectively, comprehensively look at what we want to do in that whole area so that we don't leave something out. What may result of the study, though, is we may end up coming back with a recommendation to consider doing it under one project. And reason I say that is after looking at some things very preliminarily, what we have for sewer materials, looking at some of the water main conditions of the curb, we think we may be able to do some less invasive street improvements, that we may be looking at areas that do not need to be fully reconstructed like we've been looking here in the last few years. These streets aren't as old. If you were to drive over there, the pavements are definitely in bad shape, but the curb is in pretty good shape. We do have some issues with some water main on 5th Avenue. We may have to look at selectively going in and replacing that, but the sewers appear to be a PVC that was out in the late 70s and early 80s. We're going to have that televised and confirm it's in good shape. We may not need to replace that. So we may be looking at a street improvement that is going to be more what we refer to as a pavement replacement, where we're just literally going to replace the pavement and maintain a lot of the curb that's there, maybe just do some select repairs, et cetera. So if we do that, we're looking at costs that are going to be less than what we had programmed in the capital improvements plan, which means from a capital expense standpoint, we may be able to do the 2 years in 1 year. And so again, that's what we're going to determine and find out in the study. Again, there's some benefits because the area geographically is in the same spot. A lot of the things that we're going to be needing to do are going to be very similar to the two projects. And ultimately, there'll be some savings by doing one report. If we decide to still do it as two construction seasons, all we'll have to do is do a quick amendment and hold a separate public hearing for that second in 2016. So there's some minor items that would be added if we did that as two projects. But if we do it as one, we think we're going to have some savings benefit there, and as well as coordination benefits as well. So I guess based on that, we are recommending, again, ordering the preparation of the feasibility study. I'll list the streets out so those listening or watching at home can hear those. Again, First Street Northwest from 6th to the alley over by 4th Avenue, 2nd Street. 2nd Street from 6th Avenue to the alley over by 4th Avenue. 5th Avenue from Main all the way up to 6th Street. 3rd Street from 6th Avenue over near the alley by 21 by the highway. 1st Street, again, same thing, from west of 6th Avenue to 6th Avenue. 6th Avenue from Main Street all the way up to 6th Street. And then again, this private alley, private drive that's located on city property, that we'd include that as well in the study. I guess with that, any questions or anything that I've left out?
So with these 2 years, that's all that is planned in our current CIP project west of 21.
Yes, that is correct.
So all the other streets are newer with the new development and that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's nothing else on the capital improvements plan. I know there's some older streets south of 19 that are gravel and have, I guess staff has wondered over the years what to do with them, but they were never programmed in the capital improvements plan at this point. But yeah, this is it for the streets that were identified in the capital improvements plan that was developed in 2009, west of the highway.
Hey, Bruce, I know you guys, utilities always a year ahead. If by chance things work out, we would do 2 years as one. Are you guys far enough?
We'd be okay with that. We're encompassing those 2 areas this year already, so we'll be okay. That does go through. Yeah, that'll work out fine for us.
Okay.
My question is, so if we do these both in 2015, then in 2016, we won't do anything?
That would be something we would certainly talk about. We'd probably look at shuffling the streets down and doing the 2017 street in 2016. So we'd look at doing an amendment to the capital improvements plan, which was something that was described, and we did the same thing back in I think 2012 when we shuffled the streets in the downtown. So certainly is an option. Not doing project for a year is also an option. So something that you can consider either way.
Mike, would this, if we did both 15 and 16 and 15, would that have any impact on whatever we do for the 2018 baseball project? Would there be any financial, I know they're unrelated, but financially, would that pose a problem for the other?
No, it would not, because we're looking at potentially borrowing ahead on our state aid dollars that would help pay for 6th Avenue, correct?
Correct.
So we're looking at $500,000, a little over that, pulling into the financing of the project. So, no, it would not be a big issue that
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
I think
Well-
Glenn, I'm sorry, excuse me, Pat.
So would this be, if we combined them all, it'd be a pretty costly, wouldn't it? Be double what we usually spend, or?
Well, actually, no, that's, again, the numbers that we had programmed in the capital improvements plan did assume that we were going to be doing some full reconstruction, just like we've been doing recently. Based on just our early review of the project, we're suspecting that there's going to be streets we will not need to fully reconstruct, that we will be doing things that cost less, pavement replacements, some select utility replacements, and if we do that, we'll be looking at projects that actually don't, if we did them separately 2 years, they would be actually pretty small projects. So from a economy of scale, we would probably be more advantageous to combine them and to keep a project kind of in the same caliber and size that we've been looking at. Again, that's what we'll find out from the report. Once we've determined for sure we are or are not doing full reconstructs, then we will come back with certainly a recommendation on whether it's 1 or 2 projects. And it's going to be based on size and cost.
But I think the historical piece, Glenn can add. Glenn, you indicated you were here when most of these utilities and streets were put in?
Yeah, the best information we got is that the sanitary was installed in 1980. Water main on Fifth Avenue was installed in 77, and on Sixth Avenue was installed in 80. So that's why we're assuming by combining these 2 projects, when we do the study here and do the video of the sanitary sewer and of the storm sewer, we're hoping that we're going to find things looking really good, where we won't have to replace that, where we didn't want to go into this project and just have one street and go, this is a really small job. So we're trying to look at the whole area, and hopefully we're going to find things that are looking pretty good where, yep, we'll have to tear up all the asphalt and replace that, but hopefully not all the piping and things like that. But that's what we're going to try to find out. If we come to realize that things are in worse shape than we're assuming they are, well, then we can still split it apart and still just do Fifth Avenue and 15 and Sixth Avenue and 16, and we'll have most of the study and information, fact-finding information done already. So that was our talk here for the last how long. How are we going to ensure that we have a good-sized project, but we didn't want to go overboard either, so that's why we decided to combine it as far as a study, just to look at it.
What kind of water issues are on Fifth Avenue?
There's been 7 water main breaks in 3 blocks in Fifth Avenue in the last 20 years.
Yeah, since about 94, we've had that many breaks, but what we're also kind of concerned about is if, say, for instance, if we don't do a total reconstruct on 6th, then we're left with kind of the dilemma of, do we leave that water main in place, or do we go ahead and put that in? Fifth Avenue is kind of we feel kind of a no-brainer. That needs to be replaced due to the number of breaks that we've had. 6th, that one we can kind of tell a little more after the study, so we know what the sewer's in, to know whether or not we would consider putting in water main in that. The other dilemma a little bit on the water side is if we tackle that big a project, it burdens the water department somewhat of having to do that much infrastructure in a 1-year period, because it's essentially 2 years. So that would be something we'd want to look at closely also. But
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
But based on the ages Glenn alluded to and Chris did, is that all of the more recent projects we've done is original town and the older sections of the community. And as we get farther out here, if those were installed in the late 70s, early 80s, normally they wouldn't be ready for complete reconstruction at this point, predicated on what we find out before we do a new layer of asphalt and subbase with the street reconstruction. I think you indicated that the standards we use today are different than what were used when those streets were originally constructed, as we found in a lot of areas. So the utilities may not be in as bad a shape as we think.
Okay, well, good. Not any other further comment or question, I guess I look for a motion to,
So move.
motion by Dave Brusick, second by Mark Bartuszczyk, on the resolution ordering the feasibility study for both 2015 and 2016 CIP projects. If there's any other further comment? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Passes 5-0. Going along with that, I guess, is the agreement. You're asking, or you're recommending using SEH, I assume? Glenn?
Yes, after getting to the proposal from SEH and looking at it, if you're going to look at projects to be comparable and past projects, if this project is done and it was the same size basically as 2012's project, which included First Avenue Northwest, Second Street from Fourth Avenue all the way to Columbus, that whole area. So as far as size-wise, these compare the same, and the dollar amounts are about the same. So our recommendation is to approve the professional services from SEH for this project. And as it's written in there, again, if we find that things are in better shape, or in as good a shape as we're hoping to find, naturally, a lot of these costs will be less than what's in the proposal because there'll be less survey work, less fact-finding things to look for. So that's staff recommendation to approve the professional services agreement with SEH.
So what are the steps that you go through to make sure that you're, what's the proper sequence? I mean, is it video?
We would, if this is all approved tonight, the first thing we'll do is we'll get prices for videoing the sanitary sewer and the storm sewer. And then we'll review those videos. SEH and city staff will look at those. We'll put in, with Bruce's help, a lot of documentation on the water main, which we've done most of that already. We'll also cut down, we'll get soil borings in the area. And the thing that we started doing here in the past in questionable streets is city staff actually takes about a 2-foot by 2-foot square, and we just excavate that out to see what the road bed looks like. You can see the different layers of road. Because unfortunately, we just don't have a lot of good information on these areas from the 80s or even the 70s, and it just wasn't all put together the way we do it today. So that's kind of the process. Is we're trying to put all the pieces together to see if we've got a good base in the road, we got good utilities in the road, or are they all bad and we have to go back to ripping everything out. So it's pretty much just putting all the pieces together and trying to make a puzzle out of it.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I guess look for a motion to approve SEH for the professional service agreement.
Second.
We got a motion by Dave Brusick, second by Sean Ryan. If there's no other further comment, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Okay, passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Chris.
it, always.
Be interesting to hear that study in September.
Chris, as long as we got you, any quick update on the current project that you care to share with council?
Probably nothing they haven't already read in the paper, but the project is remarkably, despite all the rain in June, they're actually ahead of schedule, which is good. I think the last of the paving should hopefully happen tomorrow, this week, So they're going to start basically restoring boulevards end of the week, this week and next week. So we're getting close. So
What do you think the estimated finish date is?
well, by the contract, the estimated finish date is 15th of August. So I'm expecting before that, probably the first week, if not sooner. So again, barring weather, that's our always challenge. So. The trail portion of the project, as you recall, we added that. It's not really part of the street improvement project, but we added it as part of the contract. We did have a substantial completion date on that, the end of August. And so far, I think things are going in our favor in terms of weather. It was very, very wet over there, and we were finding challenges on how to get in there. In fact, we did a slight modification of the design section so that it'll be a little easier to construct. But I'm expecting they'll probably get in there sometime in early August. So that should go pretty quick once they get in there.
Good.
And then the paving on the 13 project, the balance?
Yeah, the paving on the last year's project, the final lift will happen after they finish the base course paving on this year's project. They want to make sure they get that done before they're tracking on the road and things like that. So I would suspect that'll be, I haven't gotten a firm word, but I would suspect it would be next week, most likely, or the week after, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is 2015 contribution to the New Prague Fire Relief Association. Mike, are you taking us?
Yeah, I'll take that. Enclose your packet is a copy of the Form SC-14, which is called the Schedule Form for Lump Sum Pension Plans for reporting year 2014 for the New Prague Fire Relief Association. Essentially, as part of this calculation that occurs on this schedule that's provided by the Fire Relief Association, is an indication in calculating the city's typical contribution to the pension fund, that for 2015, it appears that that contribution will be required to be $0 for 2015. So,
Why is it 0, Mike? Is it because the fund has done so much better than anticipated, or?
correct.
Okay.
That if you go through historically, if you flip through the pages where I show what the city's pension contribution has been on a historical basis, the city council in 2007 increased the pension benefit from what it was to $3,050 beginning in calendar year 2008. That contribution in 2008 was only $7,000. But if you remember, right in behind that time period is when there were significant declines in fund performances in a lot of different funds around the country, including our Fire Relief Pension Fund contribution. As such, when you take a look at that there are not the assets then contained with the fund. When you take 30 firemen times $3,050 per year per fireman and calculate that pension cost going forward, that to basically become vested, partially vested, they have to work a minimum of 10 years, and to get full vesting, that requires 20 years. So if anybody leaves prior to the 10 years, they receive no benefit. Between 10 years and 20 years, they get a pro rata portion, and then after 20 years, they get a full benefit. The contributions that make up the dollars that are available basically are the city's contribution from whatever it's determined to be annually. There's a state insurance contribution that comes back annually, and that's been increasing here in recent years, as well as the fund performance, whether it has enough assets along with those other elements to meet the pro rata calculations that are contained in the worksheets that are provided in your packet. And you can see, based on the 30 firemen and their years of service to the community, what their effective accrued liability is on any given year. And you can see that in 2015, depending upon whether there's any assumed retirements or not, and at this point I don't have any that I'm aware of, doesn't mean it can't occur, but basically the obligation at the end of 2015 is just slightly south of $960,000. So when you look at what's in the fund, what comes in as far as a contribution, and what the state gives, they run through the calculation and the payouts and all of those kind of things to determine the health of that pension fund. And you can see, going back a number of years here, following 2008, the contribution went to 16, and that because of the poor performance of the fund, our contribution went up to 50, 58, 61, down to 53, 43, this year 30, and now next year it's 0. So I've shown the history since about 2000, just so you have an idea of what's there. And so it's a combination of all of those elements that really go into arriving at what that calculation is.
And where are we with the rural? Are we,
The roll I included in your packet as well. A copy.
so in
didn't number it,
2015, it's 4/5, and then,
Yeah, this coming year for 2015, it would be, they would contribute, we agreed to do a 50-50 split, but phase it in over 5 years. And so their share would have been 4/5 or 80% of that 50%, which happens to be 0. So
so they're happy this year.
I let the secretary of the association know, and yes, he was quite pleased to hear the good news. What it's going to be next year, I don't know, but you can see what their contribution has been the last 3 years. And about 52, 86, and 9,000 as we've phased that in. So, that's been a real big help in the process a little bit. So when you look at this tonight, compared to last year, it's a reduction of, what did I say, a little over $30,000, $30,134 that we do not have to make. They've also asked as part of the materials to ask for possible representation from the council, the Rural Fire Association, my involvement, and the fire department along with the pension fund, that they'd like to sit down and have a conversation about possibly asking the council to consider changing or increasing the pension contribution. Not an uncommon request that follows when the health of the fund gets to the level. They're not the first, they won't be the last fire department that makes that request. And so as we begin to look at that, is that representatives of that group would get together, take a look at that, and then ultimately both the council and the fire department has to approve that in order for that benefit to go into place, whereby the city would be required to consider that as part of their funding contribution. If the council does not agree to that, then the city has no obligation for that increased pension benefit. But what we'd probably do is to take a look at some of the fire departments in the similar population size in the immediate area and kind of see where we stand. So the last change, like I said, was the 1st of January 2008, so it's been a little over 6 years since there was any change. But it's not uncommon that typically the departments won't reduce their pension benefit when things aren't going well, but when it gets back into a very healthy position, they typically like to come and ask for a consideration of some potential change. So council can take a look at it, and you can evaluate it and decide through that participation what you want to do. That there was the agreement that the mayor and I were able to get out of the Rural Fire Association, and their agreement to participate in paying a part of the pension contribution is that if there is any future consideration given to that, is that they just ask to be able to be a partner at the table and they have the conversation. Even though they don't necessarily have the legal requirement they've agreed to participate in their funding, they'd like to have a say in that process and consideration as well. So in the end, ultimately to change it, the fire department would have to put forth a bylaw change, and that bylaw change would have to be approved by members of the fire department as well as the council in order for anything to go in. And if there was a change, I think the department would be asking for that to be effective of 1/1/2015.
Okay.
So that's the best I can do for the background. So it would really kind of be up to the council. That the request is identified in my memo that I gave you. I also included some materials on the fire pension contribution in the packet, and the materials that I got from from Gary Meyer of the fire department, and taking a look at it. So whoever the council would like to designate, whether that be the mayor or a mayor and council member, along with soliciting the Rural Fire Protection Association, the Fire Relief Association, as well as a member or two off the fire department to have that conversation. That's probably as good a representation in the review and the discussion of the information that would be appropriate should you decide to want to participate in that.
Okay.
When would that be? Just in the next month, or?
Yeah, that there is no defined timeline. It can go into effect really at any time. Most cities try to do it if you're going to do it the first of the calendar year, beginning of the year, just so that's in place. They're looking at that. I think that there is contemplation of some of the older, more experienced members that I think we've got 5 of them at the end of 2014 here that'll have 20 or more years in the department. So I'm certain that some discussion, and depending on whether a change occurs, may have an impact on their decision as to when they're going to retire.
How long will it take you to get that information from similar-sized departments?
We can go to the state auditor's office, has that on a website that, we can pull that information fairly quickly. To take us, part of a day to do it, but it's just a matter of carving out the time to do that. But it's relatively easy to access. So we could do it short-term, near-term.
Mike, it would seem kind of early to try and give them a increase to their pension by January 1. Because all we have is the 1-year track record of it being zero on our payout, whereas the fund itself might not do so well in 15, and we're back up to giving them excess of 30,000 each year.
We would be able to run and take a look at different forecasting, what those impacts would be if we changed the pension benefit.
We don't know what the funds are going to do that year until it's after the fact.
No, correct. It's the same issue that's been there historically, that, you know, if you go back, I think in your packet, you can see historically, going back to early 2000, what the city's contribution has been. And without doing an awful lot of research, if you take a look at in that early 2000 time period, 2002, 3, 4, is not to the same degree as I would be willing to bet that there was some investment issues in that time frame as well. I also included in the packet, I think on the previous page, you can also see when the contribution changed from 2004 to 5, 6, 7, and then up to what it is in 2008. So you need to run the various variables, taking a look at that, doing some forecasting to get an idea of what that may be. But there's no way to forecast with any degree of accuracy what it's going to be the next 2, 5, 7 years in total.
Right.
Other than just knowing the historical perspective of how this kind of system works, is that you know, when the investment fund is not doing well, it's going to put a little bit more responsibility to generate revenues. The state insurance amount, the state has increased it in the last couple of years here, and I think I provide that overview when we go into the general fund budget preparations as to what's coming from the state in the fire relief area, as well as what comes in kind of the police area. The state contribution has been up slightly. Our contribution, you can see, has been up and down in recent years here. And, you know, I don't know that anybody can sit here and predict and tell you exactly what either your personal or the fire department's pension relief fund is going to be in the next 2, 3, 5 years, other than we've got recent historical perspective of how it's improved in the last few years. But we can run some pretty good projections and kind of show what that's going to look like. And so that's all we can do, is try to actuarially run some different scenarios and see how it goes. But there's no way to totally predict what's going to happen with the fund itself.
Yeah, I understand.
But it's not uncommon that when things improve from a health standpoint, that the members are here asking. And as you take a look at that, I've looked at that prior number of months ago, and we're in the immediate area. We're not the when you look at Prior Lake or Savage or Shakopee or Northfield, we're not anywhere near those levels. But all of the other smaller cities in the area, with the exception of, I think, Elko New Market has a higher contribution level than we do. Part of it is that I don't think they get some of the training pay and the call-out pay that we provide separately. So it's a matter of looking at a number of those different things just to see kind of where the playing field is at, so you've got some general idea. They're not getting rich on the, I think, the $10 per hour that they get paid for the training time or the call-out pay. And so basically, with having the, what is kind of considered the volunteer fire department, even though it truly probably in today's terms with the pay that they get for the other things really isn't totally volunteer based on the pension contribution, that's really the recognition and the payment for that. And I'm afraid if we added up all the hours and divided it by the number of hours versus what some of this is, it's not a whole lot in the end. And so it's good to take a look at the market every now and then, and since it hasn't changed since the first of 2008, we're 6+ years. We'd be 7 if you put it in, if you did anything 7 years down the road, and it's probably at least prudent to meet with them and see what the numbers look like and evaluate it at that point.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it just based on the historical, it seems like every 6 or 7 years they come to the table.
Yeah, been through it
So
once
it's-
before.
So it may be, some of it may be market-driven, that the fund looks better, or maybe just, it's been 7 years, 8 years since the last time, so.
Your action tonight is just purely acknowledge receipt of the Form SC-14, but what I'd encourage you to do, if you're ready to and are wanting to, is to make a selection of 1 or 2 people off the council that we could work with the rural and the pension fund and the fire department to take a look at this issue and to ultimately bring back a recommendation at some point.
I'll join that.
Okay, first thing, I guess I'll make a motion to accept the Form SC 14 for the year 2014.
And-
A second by Pat Scripture. If there's no other further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, we have acknowledged that. Second thing, I guess I feel it's probably good to sit, at least sit down and see where they're coming from on that respect. I guess I'm willing to sit on that committee if anyone else interested?
I just said I would.
Okay, and Sean? So,
If we go more than two, then
Yeah.
we're into an open meeting law.
no, I
I
understand.
So I'd encourage you to keep it at two for now.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Does anyone else have any, inclination to do it or not? Or-
No, not.
Okay,
You two would be good.
Thanks, Pat.
okay. I guess I'll make a motion then to put the wheels in motion to sit down with the Fire Department, the Relief Association, and the Rural Association. And myself and Sean Ryan will be representing the council on the negotiating committee. So I made a motion. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Dave Brusick. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Okay. So, Mike, I guess I would let Gary know.
Yep, I'll be in touch with
And
them
then
tomorrow.
also maybe let, I don't know, the Rural Association know and,
Already did today.
okay, so that we can get this thing moving. Thank you. Next on the agenda, Police Union.
I got a call a couple weeks ago from the business agent on behalf of the members of the police union wanting to meet. We met last week. I believe it was Thursday, and they are willing to accept the same 2% wage adjustment that the council approved for the non-union for 2014. For their 2014 wage adjustment, if you recall, we've had in place a total agreement for 2012, 13, and 14 for all terms and conditions, except there's been a wage reopener every year, and they agreed to accept, and the bargaining unit had already approved it, and so they came in indicating that they were in agreement with that, and so I put together the packet for the council to consider acting on tonight.
Okay. Any questions? The only one I had, Mike, is the budget, we had 3%, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I move we approve.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion by Mark Bartuszczyk, second by Sean Ryan. Any other further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. Next, Comcast, or spin-off, or whatever they're,
Spinco?
Spinco.
I think it was a month or month and a half ago, I gave you a rather large article on what was happening in the TV industry with some of the change of the players, and indicated we thought we were going to be receiving a proposal from Comcast, which ultimately came in when I was gone on vacation. The information was shared with Bob Vos, who is an attorney with Kennedy Graven that last assisted the city when they did the Comcast or BevCom cable stuff a number of years ago. So he's also representing a number of other cities in the cable arena that this same request from Comcast has gone to a number of other Minnesota cities, so it's not new. In his letter, what he indicated that the materials that were provided to the city, the council is obligated in this request for the transfer of the cable television franchise. And to give our viewing audience and some of the council members a little bit of background, is that Comcast, which is the ultimate parent of the entity holding the cable franchise in our city, is divesting itself of certain cable televisions and connections with its ultimate acquisition of Time Warner. A great big cable deal that's in the works. Pursuant to that, in an agreement that they have with Charter Communication, Comcast is proposing to spin off a new independent company that will become Midwest Cable, Inc., or better known as SpinCo, a publicly traded company that will be the ultimate owner of the franchise. And upon the completion of the transaction, Comcast shareholders, but not Comcast itself, will own approximately 2/3 of Midwest Cable, and Charter will own approximately 1/3 of Midwest Cable. The entity that they're talking about, SpinCo, currently does not exist. So they're transferring assets and different factions on paper to a company that has no historical performance historically. The council, to fulfill its responsibilities under cable franchising, is required to conduct a technical, legal, and financial review of the request that is forthcoming from Comcast. In Bob Vose's opinion, and I included a copy of his letter along with his questions and requests for additional information, we're required to acknowledge that they are not really compliant with the information that they did provide, and within 30 days have to give them notice that we don't believe that they are. And then he provided a number of other questions and clarification that he believes is necessary. Otherwise, we're required under cable law to act within 120 days on the formal transfer request. By doing what we did, is we're able to preserve and extend that to whatever is necessary to now hopefully get the deal done. So we're in no position to recommend tonight that you, number one, begin to take any action. Number two, we've got some work ahead of us. Historically, it's been my experience that we've been able to, in these kind of transfers, get the new entity to essentially pay for the city's legal cable costs in conducting the transaction, because they obviously want to get up and get into business and to get operating. Whereas compared to the actual refranchising, the expectation there is that existing cable fees that we receive already would be used to pay for any legal fees that we would encounter. Right now, all of our cable television franchise fees kind of go into our general fund budget, but that's where we carved off in the legal budget. If you recall, when we did that, we put together monies that would be used for the cable TV franchising process. So we reserved some dollars in that respect. In light of the fact that this process is going to take some time, we need to make a decision as a city whether we choose to do work with Mr. Vose or whether we do a different attorney. So that's one thing. But the second part, recognizing that both of our cable franchises are going to expire, Comcast and BevCom will expire in April and May of next year. Comcast is not in a position to begin having any real discussions with, because we're not certain what the player or the entity is going to be when we get done and who we're going to be able to talk to. So it points to, and in my discussions with Bob, and he confirmed it, is it probably makes more sense for us to begin the process of renegotiating the franchise with BevCom. And then ultimately, in hopes that we reach agreement there, we can then use the template of that negotiation to be what we would offer to the end product or entity that's going to exist out of this transfer process. But if we wait till this is all said and done and then try to start the process, we'll be months down the road trying to get to that point. So really your action tonight is to basically, number one, acknowledge receipt of the Comcast Corporation / Midwest Cable, Inc. transaction proposal. And then two, we have to develop the process or make a selection on who we want to be our legal guru for the cable franchise processes.
Yeah, after I read this, it came to realize that Midwest Cable is nothing but a piece of paper. We don't have any employees associated with it. They don't have any equipment associated with it. They've got nothing other than some names on a piece of paper. So I think it behooves us to not sign anything and let somebody like Bob Vose, who seems to be on top of it. His point number 14 here I thought was very appropriate. Provide a detailed corporate tree as to who and where each corporation and their officers are in this vast paper shell company, if you will.
Well said, Dave.
I think you're right, Mike. He said we should go with BevCom seems to be a more stable, or at least we know more about it.
Well, yeah, that they're here, we can touch them, we can feel them, we can interact with them, that they're in a number of communities in our general area and have been a good provider, and not that there's anything against Comcast, but they're
Right.
asking us to transfer the franchise to some unknown entity that, who do we know is going to be driving up and down the streets, and who's going to respond to any questions? I personally happen to use them for internet services, and so, my question is going to be is that what is that entity going to be long-term, and who am I going to qualify as service problems, and how do we take care of those kind of things, whether it be cable or internet or what have you?
Yeah, I think Bob Vose seems to be up on all this. I would just as soon keep him as the lawyer.
He's within Scott's firm. He's one of the
Right.
other attorneys in
Right.
Kennedy and Graven that has been used by the city in the past. I personally haven't had any experience with him, but have no question that he can't perform the services.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess my question, Mike, is that this letter that I assume has been sent,
We did that to preserve the record and make sure that the 30 days notice didn't go by without having that of the record.
right, so then, that being said, Comcast, right now, we're under no time restraints because we're waiting for answers against this
Correct.
letter.
Yep.
So that the clock is not ticking as of right now.
Well, the 120 days is or would have been had they met the requirements, but now that they don't, then I can't tell you exactly what the timeline is going to be. I've got to work more with that. The letter that you saw Bob drafted is the same letter that he drafted and used for all of his other cable clients that he has Comcast with. So he just didn't write this on our behalf. It's a template, and they got the same one from all the franchises that he's managing. And I solicited information and have that, and just got it here late Friday as to who his other clients are and what other cities have Comcast. And that's part of the new cable franchising process, where we haven't done anything for a number of years, is to begin to take a look at what's out there in the market or out there in the industry that's different than what we had when we entered into those agreements 15 years ago. Begin to take a look at it, what concerns or issues we have, and how do we blend those and meld those to put together a proposal for a meeting with BevCom and seeing where that might go. But if we do it and get it done with one, then we've got the template sitting there, and the other one is, here it is.
Have we had any contact from BevCom at all?
No, not as of yet. That I think indicated on my front page is that
Theirs must be May.
theirs is May.
Yeah, because this
but-
was April's.
Yeah, the Comcast is April, and BevCom is May of 2015. And so when you think about it, we're really not that far away.
No,
It'll take us all of those months to probably get something done.
yes. Okay, I guess from the standpoint of the council, I guess, I'll make a motion that we have a receipt of the Comcast proposal and the response put out by Mr. Vos in regards to that. And so I guess I'll make a motion on that.
Second.
I got a second by Dave Brusick. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. And then I guess the next thing that we're looking for is selection of legal counsel.
Yeah, I'll make a motion, we accept Bob Vose.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion by Dave Brusick, second by Pat Scripture, to accept Mr. Vos as the attorney or legal counsel for the franchise proceedings. Any other further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, very good. So then I guess maybe the next steps would be to contact Mr. Vos and see,
We'll kind of outline a process of where we need to go with both of them, so you've got an idea as to what that's going to look like.
okay?
We'll also be soliciting public input into the process once we've got a chance to kind of determine what are some of the common things that are in the franchise agreements that maybe we don't have, but then also give the public an opportunity to provide any feedback that they want to before we go too far into the process.
Okay, good. So next on the agenda, it looks like the second reading of the change, the amendment to change some of the wording in the
two different city amendments, or city code sections 5101. That was an existing code. We were just adding a couple of words, being connections. The second one was city code section 5204, which was actually adding the whole statement saying that all sewer connections and lines are property owners. So nothing has changed, and this is the second reading. It's the same that you saw on July 7th meeting. So just asking for review and approval of the amendments to the city code. If the council approves this, then it goes, gets published in the paper and then becomes effective 30 days after publication.
Okay, any questions?
Are we supposed to dispense with the reading of the ordinance? When we're on the Charter Commission and we, that?
You want us to actually read the changes, the second reading, and then?
No, it just says in the Home Rule Charter,
Mm-hmm.
because how we're on the, the commission now. It says that you're supposed to read the ordinances out.
Oh, actually read it.
And so, but we can dispense with them. I just think we should do it because it is in our charter. We should just dispense with it too.
Okay.
We didn't pass the new charter changes yet, though.
No, this is in the old one.
The old-
Oh,
one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
just in going over it, we came
Okay.
across that.
But we
But
can
it should be
paraphrase
read,
it.
so we can dispense with it. That'll eliminate it.
Didn't it give us the ability just to paraphrase it, which we kind of just did, or? I don't recall.
I don't know
Yeah,
what you think.
basically, in section 1 of the ordinance, we're adding the underlined words which contain connections and, that's both in the first line and second line, and the third line of section 5101 titled "The Waterworks" on the sewer side. In section M, which is a complete new addition, it includes language where all sewer connections and lines from the city's sewer mains are considered private, belonging to the property owner, and it shall be the property owner's responsibility to maintain the connections and lines.
Okay, so you read it. Okay.
Done.
Can dispense with it.
Okay. I guess I'll make a motion to approve the second reading.
second.
Second by Mark Bartuszczyk. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay.
Thank you.
Publish that and then we'll get it going. Ken, I assume this is your baby.
This is a real quick update on our population estimates. We already always receive our estimate for the prior year, April 1. So the current estimate that we just received, which is in your packet, is current to April 1, 2013. Right now, as you see it, is following a objection I made to the estimate. They initially had submitted our estimate with showing a loss of 28 residents on our Scott County side of the city. The explanation they gave in the initial estimate was that they base it off of, it's called the American Community Survey, results that are done between the census, and they get a sampling of household sizes and how they change for the people they sample, which again is obviously a sample size, and that showed that the average household size had dropped on the Scott County side and not on the LeSueur County side. Well, I argued that New Prague is a whole, and we aren't completely different on both sides of Main Street, and that they should just stick with our 2000 census average for the Scott County side, and they did, which adjusted our population on the Scott County side to show a 3-resident increase and not a loss of 28. On the flip side, on LeSueur County, again, they base this off information on household size, and they figured that we had 38 new residents on the LeSueur County side, even though both had 10 new homes added. So theoretically, it should have been the same on both sides. So anyway, long story short, I objected. They did make the change. Basically adjusted our Scott County side back to the 2010 census updated information on household resident size. So we show an increase of 41 people over the past 2012 to April 1 of 2013 time period, which is the most current data we have. And that is 20 new homes, and that matches with the permit data that Mary Jo maintains on new housing units that we have. So in the end, we're happy with the result. So we're up 41.
Okay.
And we'll get another one again next year. So it's the first time we've actually had to go through that, and it's kind of unusual. We get our Met Council population estimate, even though we're not in the Met Council for Scott County, and then LeSueur County is the state demographer. So never had them not match up very well. So kind of a new thing. So I wanted to bring that to your attention.
Well, I'm sure the Met Council is trying to keep the population down on this side of the river so that they can spend all the money north of the river.
I
We had to do this whole thing.
wouldn't know exactly. Yeah, we had to follow the process that's kind of outlined in the handout that I had for you. So.
Well, good. Thank you,
Yeah.
Ken. Okay. Next on the agenda, discussion of creation of a baseball committee.
I'll take the lead on that, Mayor. We've been meeting with representatives on the kind of an ad hoc baseball committee comprised of Mike Stika, Jerry Wallerius, who's here in the audience tonight, Jerry Plomback, Councilmember Brusick, Public Works Director Stika, and myself, where we've been working on a number of issues associated with future baseball stadium improvements, trying to identify what those might include and what they might entail, potential funding and cost estimates for some of those elements, as well as looking at what's needed in order to host that 2018 State Amateur Baseball Tourney. We've been talking about how we, as this community has grown in recent years, how we attempt to bring some coordination and interaction to, for lack of a better term, kind of a New Prague Baseball Committee, and I don't know what it would be, so we're not trying to finalize at this point. But what we've done with the assistance of both Jerry and Mike Stika and discussions we've had at the committee level is purely for discussion purposes only. We're not here with any final, but we have a proposal that kind of creates a conceptual committee and an outline of the potential representation on this community baseball committee. The reason being is we talk about various issues as far as scheduling, usage, improvements that are needed, the food stand, any number of different elements. There appears to be different people that have different baseball entities or associations that have played different roles, taken on various responsibilities, and not always, and improvements to the field, not always with a coordinated interaction of the entire, what I would term, baseball community throughout the city. So in some of our recent committee discussions, we've talked about how can we create long-term looking ahead, a way to develop a collaborative involvement of representatives from all facets of the baseball community in this city, from the Orioles, the New Prague High School baseball, the New Prague Youth Baseball Association, some at-large community members, to help us wrestle with some of those things that really, in some cases, I'm not certain that are the city's responsibility, but we get drug into it for various reasons because there isn't an official committee that kind of meets and coordinates and takes on some of those elements or issues. So it was with great assistance from Jerry and Mike that we've had discussion. Included in your packet is kind of just a rough outline of the committee. But then on the second page, and again, this is only for discussion, that we're not certain that this is the right size in the end, but it was an attempt to begin outlining kind of the makeup of who the involvement might be or should be in this process. Before we went anywhere to try to look at getting this committee off the ground, because we also think it can and maybe should play a role in the long term as we go through what we're going to have to go through the next few years. As you heard the committee that came to you originally with some of the improvements that I'd like to see get done, it affects any number of these different baseball groups, and in some cases differently. And when you take a look at funding and participation and how things should be done, from maintenance to the scheduling to the improvements to the food and other things, so to speak, we wanted to find a way. And I've had past success in the creation of an ad hoc baseball committee in the community that played a certain role and enabled decision-making to go on within that committee. And that because the city is technically the owner of the facility, and I'm not certain, other than performing minor maintenance, Glenn and Ken, in historical years, and helping with the scheduling. There's been other things that have been kind of quasi-independent of the city and has gone on in some cases without necessarily our input or oversight in different things. And so as the owner, we should have a certain role in that, but we don't think we should have to chase all of the different levels of the baseball association. And we think fundamentally, long-term, it makes better interaction if we can work with a committee that has the representation and let them fight out behind the scenes the issues and things that they need to work on from the baseball community side of things, and then let us be involved with the ownership and the maintenance. We get or hear different stories about people wanting different parts of the facility maintained in a different order. That, you know what, you put all the people that play in the field in a room and you guys talk about and figure out what you want the end product to be, then we can figure out how we maintain it in that realm or what have you. If we need improvements to fix something, talk about it, see what seems to work best so that it can cover everybody's needs. We know the ownership of the food stand, the equipment is owned by the Orioles or the New Prague Baseball Association, and that when different levels of baseball are played there, sometimes there's questions that, why isn't the food concessions open and available? And so in taking a look at that, those are kinds of decisions that I think that baseball committee ought to be able to handle and take on. And whether they share in a portion of the concessions or whatnot, right now all of that is really being done by the Orioles, that they own most of the equipment, they buy all the products in that, and so you get different pushing and pulling and tugging back and forth when different people look at that as, well, why can't we get to it, and what do we need to pay, and shouldn't we share in the profits, and where do the profits go, and what are they being invested in? And so I think without creating that long term, with that different level of representation, as we go out and work with this current committee, trying to work with the council to see where we want to go long term, is we think there's some real community benefit to try to strategically create a long-term fundamental baseball committee with representation from the various community elements. Before we went to trying to initiate that or to go down that path, we wanted to bring it back to you for your review and comment, because I certainly don't want to be out pushing for this kind of creative committee, so to speak, without your blessing and support, that we've got your backing to try to look at this. We personally, I think as a staff, from a maintenance and an oversight, and especially when you look at the improvements and things yet to come in the next 2 to 3 years, if we're going to get ready for that 18 tournament, is we should have the entire baseball community involved in that process. Doesn't mean everybody has to be at every meeting, but we need to have the right key players involved in the processes. So Jerry's here tonight, that he was kind enough to take time out of his schedule and come in tonight. Mike wasn't able to be here. I think he's umpiring, if I understand it, but Glenn would tell you from our discussions, we think this kind of thing needs to be created, that we've got a more fundamental, formalized, organized entity that we can work with, and maybe Jerry's got some additional things that he can add for your benefit. But besides the representation of the different baseball elements in there, is that we'd recommend that there's some at-large community involvement. And when you start getting into the improvements and the financing and the funding and the cost sharing and the different things of that nature, it affects everybody up and down. And especially if we're going to take a look at trying to improve this field to the quality of the level that I think people are expecting it to be ready in 2018. How that field gets used, when it gets used, when you're not going to use it, and how it's going to be managed really should be done with the involvement of all the people that are trying to play on it. And instead of us having to try to communicate with any number of the different levels independently of each other, we think somehow they should be brought together in some type of community baseball committee. So with that, I guess I'd offer to Jerry if there's any additional commentary you think that I've missed or not touched on. I think fundamentally we're at a crossroads in the sense that when you look at how has the community grown in the last decade, from 2000 to 2010, and now the last 4+ years or so. When you look at the last 15 years, it's just kind of managed itself or worked on its own. It hasn't really been organized in a collaborative effort and structurally put together to do these things. It doesn't mean that there's necessarily anything wrong or not working quite right, but there are ways, I think, to improve it better than what it is. And if we're going to tackle the improvements and develop the fundraising and the cost sharing that needs to go into that, the users of that field need to have some participation and input into that process.
Are you thinking of adding another commission or committee
No,
underneath?
this really wouldn't be a city one. This
Okay.
would not be a city board or commission. This is a community group
Okay,
that in some communities, those that took the time to tour up to Delano really got a flavor of what I'm kind of talking about. Mayor, I think you went, David, you went. That they had kind of created their own committee, maybe on a slightly smaller front, but basically along the same lines. Jerry went as well and Glenn went. And so that's the type of community committee we're looking at trying to get started. We as the city as the owner, depending upon whether we begin to invest more dollars than you historically have, whether we undertake certain major improvements, it's going to have to be done in conjunction with working with the baseball community. That the high school baseball has needs that are there and different than maybe the youth baseball or different than the A's baseball. And so when you take a look at that, when you figure out who has the priority to use the field, how are you going to schedule it, what's going to get done, when you get done using it, what are the things that are expected of you to put it in a condition that the next team can come in and use it. Sometimes there's little fights and idiosyncrasies that come out of that, and I don't know that we as a city need to really enter into the framework of having to wrestle with those issues. Those are elements that really could be done by this community baseball committee. Glenn, I don't know if there's anything you want to add from the public works side, but we feel strongly that I think this is going to be long-term, is going to be needed if we're going to put in place the framework and the structure to address the concerns and the issues that are going to come out of the current ad hoc baseball committee that's looking at 2018 for the state amateur tournament. So it's our suggestion and recommendation to you that you consider something like that. We don't profess it to be finely tuned or finely adjusted here, but it's kind of an outline for discussion purposes.
but I guess I definitely agree with the concept. I think we need to have the whole baseball community in New Prague come together and not only take ownership in that field, but also take ownership of how baseball should be handled in the city of New Prague. So from my standpoint, if you're looking for a motion of some sort of support, I'm willing to make a motion to support a committee like this with representation from the different baseball organizations, with city involvement on that committee to spearhead not only, like Jerry said, getting the field ready for 2018, but preparing the field and keeping the field in for many years to come. So,
That was the motion, I second it.
yeah, thank you. I got a motion by Chuck Nicolai, second by Mark Bartuszczyk, to go forward with this. Any other comments?
Is it a motion in support of or to go forward?
Your motion of supporting a committee like this with representation from all different areas of the baseball community. Does that clarify it?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I got a motion and second. If there's no other comments, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Okay, good. Well,
you.
guys, good luck. I know you got a big job ahead of you, but I think this will be a very good start to kind of get a committee going with this, so. Next, consent agenda. Any questions, corrections, additions, or anything to any items in the consent agenda? If not, I guess I'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Moved. Second.
Motion by Mark Bartuszczyk, second by Sean Ryan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Okay. Miscellaneous. Bruce, anything in your front? Okay. Glenn?
I've got nothing.
Ken?
Couple of things. Pool survey deadline was today. We've got, as of this morning, a little over 1,000 surveys, and if it were not to include any returns that might come in, I'll count some in the mail that come tomorrow, and any that are filled out online through the end of the night. So that's about a 16.5% return rate on the 6131 that we mailed out, so not too bad. So we'll get that into the consultant's hands to get summarizing that. Over 50% more were filled out via paper than online, which I thought was interesting. So we still have a lot of manual paper survey residents in town here. And so that's item number one. Item number two I had was that regarding Russ Schurig and the chart issue. Mike had obviously copied the council on a letter that we had let Russ know that we're going to be working with him. I was waiting for Bruce Lyman to get back from being out of the country. Was finally able to speak with him today on a number of issues that were outlined, and we'll be following up the summary with the council and further discussions with Mr. Schurig on that matter. So we're finally getting things, information collected, and we'll get that back out as soon as we can. So I've let Russ know as well. I'm just waiting for Bruce to get everything in order, and he's been more than willing to wait. So
Okay, good,
we'll continue to work on that.
good. Pat?
I got the email about the compensation study. Did everybody see that today? It's not gonna be done till October. I find that amazing. I just can't believe it. And then I'm reading the notes that came with it. And it says something about, there's something with the 2015 budget. Isn't it for this year? Wouldn't it be retroactive for this year?
Council would have the choice in taking a look at the report, whether you make any amendment to 2014, whether you hold it to 15, that's your choice. We had a 3% budgeted, 2% was
Yeah.
awarded. So the council has the abilities, yes.
We had all along talked about it for 2014 and, you know, how we just did that 2% raise and we had 3% in there for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I just can't, it's going to take 20 months for this. It was supposed to be done the end of June. Now it's October.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be finalized in November. I think October, November of last year.
Last year.
About 10 months behind, yep.
And a lot of that was due to Springstead and some of the issues that they had, plus a lot of bigger other more important issues that came up last spring. I don't have a problem with it. I mean, it's taken a little bit longer time, but I don't, I'm friends with many, many city employees, and I've never had one of them come up to me and be curious about a comprehensive study, so.
You know, this isn't totally Springstead's fault, and I've told you what have been some of the causes in the process, that I did expect that there's going to be more done in June and July than there has, that we did discover that Ann personally herself was out of the office in June and half of July for vacation. She had another gentleman in her office that broke his ankle in June and wasn't at work, so she lost her staff because of the delays that I caused, that it put us back in the queue as far as getting done with other projects. So it snowballed from that standpoint, and so we lost our place in the priority line as a result of some of the delays that I had earlier this spring. And so I'm not willing to push all this onto Springstead, and yes, it's late. There's other things that, as I told you, that have crept into the process in priorities in recent months, and so you'll just have to weigh and balance that as you do my review at the end of the year. That this is one that's taken longer. There's other things that have been done that we've been successful at that I'm not going to hide behind, that I think we did well, that weren't in the priority list, and so you have to balance all of them. That you don't get to pull one project out of the air and say that one's late, and it is, no question about it. But there's other ones that crept in that process that you asked us to take care of and do that you're also not acknowledging in part of the process. So
Well, this is
we put out the
something
first.
that affects all the employees.
Yes,
I
it
mean,
does. and I can't change it from where it's at, that to go out and do the cert, or do the request that she's doing right now, the timing is dependent upon whether cities turn it in or not. I met with a group of administrators today that have gotten these requests, and in responding to try to do them, most of it takes half to 3/4 to a full day just to respond to a survey of this nature. I'm going to have to send personal letters and make personal phone calls to the administrators to see if they will participate, because these things come along so often that in many cases, a number of times, you put them in the wastebasket and you don't even do them. So they don't know who's going to respond, what the volume of the response is going to be, and that directly affects the timing of what's going to go on. If everybody does them and turns them in the first week, then you gain 2 to 3 weeks right there in the process. And so I can't tell you what it's going to be. She's got it outlined in the schedule that I provided to you, is based on her best guess, assuming participation based on her past experience. That's the best I can update you tonight.
And we've had 2 employees retire already this year that didn't, if they would have gotten any benefit from this, they don't get it at all, right? Are we going to be paying those people if we figure out that?
I don't know that answer, that the council's going to have to answer that question, but I wouldn't expect that if anybody's retired, that there's no back pay due them or entitled to them because there was nothing in place.
Pat, that was something that I was going to ask Scott Riggs tomorrow night,
Okay.
tomorrow, whether we can go back a year.
Yeah, because we have at least 1 more retiring this year.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And I agree, but I don't know what what the city council can do to go and back pay some of this, but I think it's deserved, and I intend to find out what we as a council can do.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? Okay.
Yeah, I do. Last meeting, we went into a closed session, and I was always under the impression that if it was a closed session, that meant that until that subject or issue was completed, that it wasn't made public to the paper or anybody else. Yet, I think, Mike, that you gave Pat much of the information that we discussed at that closed session. Am I right?
I don't believe I did, do you?
Well, somehow it got into the paper that much of what we discussed was
The
brought to the paper, the topic.
topic that was on the agenda, and it was highlighted, and Patrick asked the question, is the same discussion that we've been involved with for the last 6 years with the Cedar Lake Sanitary Sewer Group. There was no
Right.
discussion on the position that the council's taken or where that's going, that the basis in the public information that's already in existence is that the sewer district has proposed from day one not to have to contribute anything. Where they're at currently and where they're going, there was no discussion on any of that, nor
Okay,
where the
then
council has gone.
Then I read too much into it.
I believe
because
you did on the surface, is that the information that was there, that I answered questions for Patrick, is no different than the public information that exists to date on that topic.
Okay, and I apologize.
I try to walk a very close line in that regard, and I don't believe I disclosed anything from that closed session that would materially impact where the council and the sewer district is at in their discussions.
Okay,
I thought it was okay, Dave.
did you? Okay, then I read
That doesn't
some.
mean I read it right either.
Yeah, I may have
I thought it was
read
okay.
too much into it then. That's all I have.
Anything else? Mark, you have anything? Sean?
Nope.
Mary Jo? You got, one of these days, you're going to surprise us, aren't you? Patrick, you got anything?
Now it's her retirement.
How's the play going over there? Okay, good. Jerry, you got anything? I don't have anything, so I guess I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Sean Ryan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? We're out of here. Thank you, everyone.